we face criticism because of that, because we have a more cowboy approach of saying, listen, we know this works. Mother Nature already did it to us. We just got to scale this up very slowly and win hearts and minds doing it, because at the end of the day, no one actually does listen to scientists, in my opinion. If we did, we'd have solved climate change back in the 1980s when Carl Sagan, stepped in front of Congress and said, hey, this greenhouse gas thing is we should look into this.
Welcome to Manifold. My guest today is Andrew Song. He is one of the founders of Make Sunsets, a Y Combinator climate startup. I'm going to let him explain to you what the startup is about in a few minutes. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's great having you on. We met at this zany sort of festival conference at Lighthaven in Berkeley called Manifest. And we were actually at, I guess you were a speaker or some kind of VIP guest, because we met at the sort of VIP dinner. And right. As I was just saying to you before we started recording, I was really impressed how well you could explain a really complicated topic like what your startup does. But before we get into that, I just want to talk to you a little bit about your background, where you grew up. I know you were a competitive swimmer, as I was. Let's start with that. So, did you grow up on the West Coast?
I did. I grew up in San Jose, California, actually.
Okay, so you live not far from where you grew up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And how did you end up at NYU? And how was the swim team?
So I ended up at NYU because I could swim. I went to this high school called Bellarmine College Prep, which is like an all-boys Catholic Jesuit school, and they were very formidable in the aquatics. I think there's no state level championships for California, but there's sectionals and stuff, and so they were very dominant for the past 30 years. They won probably 29, the equivalent of a state championship. And so I was recruited to swim for NYU. And, on the side, I was also an econ major. And so swam all 4 years. And the program was actually the first time I think they actively recruited from these prep schools. And I think at least it's been a while, but in one of the seasons we were undefeated in one of our dual meets. Wow. So I wasn't the fastest guy on the team, but I was definitely the shortest, but I would still beat some guys that were much taller than me. We've met in person. I'm probably 5'7" on a good day, and so and my specialty was breaststroke, where it's more about the rhythm and the technique than it is so much about brute strength. I mean, strength obviously plays into it, but that's what I specialized in, excelled at. Very cool. Now, correct.
Am I wrong about this? Is NYU Division III?
That's correct. And for funny reasons, because usually you're broken up by size of school, because NYU is roughly around 40 to 50,000 total students. But because I think it was in the late 70s or early 70s, they were caught for price fixing their basketball games by the mafia. And so they got knocked down to Division III, and never came back up. So that's the lore of NYU D3.
Wow, that's some great New York City color. The mob is involved in your sports program.
Yeah. We had basketball teams playing at the Madison Square Garden, and then they were getting fixed. Wow. So shaving points.
Wow. Now, most people don't realize how big NYU is. I mean, is it the biggest private school in the country? Because 40, 50,000 kids. It's like a Big Ten school, like where I teach.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of the largest private schools in the nation, I believe.
Yeah. So I swam Division III also at one of the tiniest schools in the country, Caltech, which my graduating class was, I think, 186 kids. And wow. So I think my high school swim team was better than my college swim team, but nevertheless.
Same with me. Same with me. So
now I also swam breaststroke. I was breaststroke and sprint freestyle. I had no endurance whatsoever. But I was a pretty good sprinter. And I want to run some physics by you and see what you think of it.
Sure.
See, one of the reasons why you see, I think, people who aren't that tall, I'm just over 6 feet. So, um, the reason you see a lot of people who aren't that tall for swimmers being competitive in breaststroke is because instead of being a straight line when you swim it, that the stroke actually breaks up the fluid dynamics of the stroke, and so the height advantage is not as great in for breaststroke as it is for the other strokes. Because the other strokes, if you're a streamline and you have really good reach and leverage, that height really pays off. But for breaststroke, it doesn't as much. And if you look historically, a lot of the top Asian swimmers back in the day before, I don't know if you know this guy Pan Zhangle, but before he became like the top sprint freestyler in the world, most of the success for a lot of the Asians was actually in breaststroke.
That's correct. Yeah, the Japanese specifically were really good at it. So
yeah. Cool. So, how do you like New York? Was it a shock to you to go to New York from Bay Area?
Oh, I mean, yeah, definitely, because I was a sheltered, kid from San Jose, and I just wanted to get away from my parents. And I was the first. I'm one of four kids, but my older brother stayed in state. So I was the first kid to like venture outside the state, and I just wanted to experience the big city. And I really liked the team, and that's why I joined. Also, just I had some sights of actually working on Wall Street, and so I thought, hey, maybe this could be my foot in the door. But fate had a different.
Yeah. So why are you not a hedge fund magnate right now?
It was I graduated in 2008, and so that's when the peak financial. Yeah, perfect timing to graduate in finance. And so I still worked as like a economic consultant. So that's like I guess the biggest firm you've probably heard of is like Analysis Group, but worked for smaller teams that essentially evaluated like catastrophic events. When bad things happen, you have to calculate those damages, and you can't get a lawyer or insurance person to actually calculate those damages. You have to hire a person like me to actually calculate. And so it was a very analytical, very collegial type of environment. Generally, I would be like generating reports for PhDs on basic economic data, and trying to share hey, if like we worked for some pharmaceutical companies where unfortunately there's like 18-year-olds that died because they were smoking and had birth control patches at the same time. They had massive heart attacks. These insurance companies had to figure out how to calculate the damages and how to make these people whole. So they hire people like us to do that.
Wow.
And so did that for about 2 years, but got kind of depressed because I was essentially putting numbers on people, and it just didn't sit right with me. Like I couldn't separate the two. And coming from Silicon Valley, and 2010 was like the start of the app boom, like mobile app boom. I thought, hey, like this could be an opportunity for me to go back and try something.
Now, I think I read maybe in your LinkedIn profile that you have some experience actually with hardware startups. Is that right?
That's correct. And so that's the first company that I started was around actually guitars that you can play in less than 5 minutes. And that was actually the Y Combinator company that I went through with. Make sense as it's not a YC company, but we have a lot of shared investors, like Pioneer Fund, which is like a YC alumni group, has invested us. So that's where the confusion might have come from. But both Luke, my co-founder, and myself are YC alums.
I see. My bad. I think I read that you were YC alums. I just assumed it was your present company, but it was your earlier company.
That's correct.
So talk a little bit about, I mean, I think YC has become such a phenomenon now. It seems like for early stage stuff, it's like there's so many YC companies, especially in AI, like where I'm involved right now. There's just so many. There's just like every year YC is like just pumping out like massive numbers of aggressive teams to do, in this case, AI. What is it like being a YC alum? What is it, the best thing about it? What's the worst thing about it?
I think the best thing about it is the network. That when you meet another alum, they went through somewhat of a similar program. I mean, it obviously has evolved throughout the years. I was like, when I go to an alumni meetup, like I say, I'm winter 2016. People think I'm a dinosaur, and so like they're like, "Wow, you're old school," and but at the end of the day, like it's something where even though the program has changed probably dramatically for scaling purposes, you still have that kind of basic foundation of being an alum and being part of a very selective group of people that there was some sort of vetting process. Like I kind of joke, I say, like, at least I know you're not an idiot, like, or you're smart enough to get in. And so like, that's like, I think, because I didn't go to a somewhat like you went to Caltech, I went to NYU, which is in my opinion, like a very basic school. And so like, like it was a very low bar in my opinion to get into NYU. I just had to swim really fast. But like you don't get that kind of clearing you do with like, a Caltech or Stanford or Berkeley. And so it's a nice way to kind of get that pre-vetting to say that, okay, like, and the confidence of, these conversations can be candid. They can be straightforward. There's no bullshitting around. I think when I first got into startups, people like to hype up their numbers or fake numbers or try to boister like their actual position, rather than actually ask for help, rather than actually understand like what are the struggles that you're going through. And I think I can do that with any YC founder, but I have to be a little bit more guarded when I'm talking to other founders about that. So
interesting. One of the mysteries I was hoping to resolve in the interview is how it is that your present company, Make Sunsets, could be a YC company, given what you guys do. And I think you've sort of cleared that up for me now, because Make Sunsets didn't actually go through YC. So let's get into, so as we get into what your company does, which I think is really cool. It's actually a big concept thing, I think, which is, I think the thing I thought my listeners would get the most out of. How did you get focused on that problem? Because it isn't, it's such a big ambition. Usually the people that work in this area are people who are really focused on climate change. Like they view it as a real existential issue for humanity. And that's often their driver, not necessarily wanting to become the next unicorn.
Yeah. I mean, throughout my career and, growing up, I grew up in sunny California. And I also was a Boy Scout growing up. And so, I'm fairly in tune with nature. And I care about the environment. And so that was always in the back of my head. Also, my parents are immigrants and they had a very scarcity type of mindset where it kind of evolved into sustainability where like, back in the day, you would use a piece of paper to do your homework. And so my dad, shocking, right? But my dad would always say, use both sides of the paper before you use a new piece. And, that was something where it was instilled in me. It's like, hey, this is a what's the word I'm looking for? This is a scarce resource that we need to, keep track of, and not use so much. And I think it came from a more economic standpoint. My dad just doesn't want me to go through like, pages and pages of paper, even though it's fairly cheap. But they were immigrants with 4 kids, so money was a little bit tight growing up. But that then evolved to actually my first company that I wanted to start was called Ovos, which was a cooking app. Because our family was so large, and all of us actually played sports, we would consume tons of food. So my mom would also like just make a ton of food, but sometimes we wouldn't eat it all. And so I just see that waste being produced. And so I thought, hey, like, is there a way for my mom to manage this? And so I thought, back in 2010, the App Store was starting to blow up, and you had this computer that had a camera that was connected to the internet, and people are interested in making new types of apps. And so I thought, is there a way for us to use optical character recognition to scan grocery receipts to then recommend recipes based off what you purchased? So this was pre-Scale AI. This was this is using Tesseract, which is like an open source. Tesseract was the OCR, but OpenCV was the vision we used to scan the actual receipt. But then we had to feed it into the receipt data into what do you call it? What was it called? Mechanical Turk, which is Amazon's service back in the day, to then say, translate, what does OGR mean? It can mean organic. It can mean orange. What does WHT mean? It can mean wheat. It can be white. And, these are the types of problems that we were trying to solve because, I wanted to figure out how we could prevent 30% of all food going straight to the landfill, because I thought that was an important thing. But then I quickly realized no one cared about saving their food. Like the demographic that I was going after wasn't the same that owned like really expensive smartphones at the time. And so this was just a mismatch in the market. And so from that, I learned, hey, I got to learn more about this whole tech thing, and just started to become like a journeyman, and went through various roles at different companies, trying to be either like the first hire, the first non-technical hire, and kind of scale myself up and be ready for, when the timing I thought was right to start something like Make Sunsets.
Interesting. Now, that little theme I want to come back to where you said, wait, nobody wants to save food. Nobody gives a shit about this. I want to come back to that in terms of what you're doing now. But I guess the thing I was trying to get at is, you really become aware of climate change, the physics of climate change, because really what your company is doing is really leveraging a certain very specific kind of physics related to change. How did that awareness arise with you and your co-founder? Like, and then it must have then become like an actual direction that you're willing to commit years of effort to.
Sure. So it was actually, the inspiration was from my co-founder, Luke Eisman. He had read the book Termination Shock by Neil Stephenson, which talks about this. Essentially a gas station magnet sends sulfur dioxide, like artillery shells up into the stratosphere to cool Earth.
Wow. I gotta tell Neil next time I talk to him that does he know he inspired your startup?
Yeah, absolutely. In his Substack, he wrote about us, saying, this is the only company that's actually trying to attempt something like this. And so I got a little hat tip from him from that. So.
Okay. So your co-founder read the story. Were you just like, well, Neil's a serious guy and he did study physics and electrical engineering. So maybe maybe this idea will actually work. Like, how much due diligence did you guys do on the actual science before you? Yeah,
I first thought Luke was insane to even propose such an idea. Because I knew Luke since 2015. And he came to me with this idea back in 2022. So we had known each other for quite a while, and he would always share ideas with me of like, hey, this idea sounds interesting. Like, do you want to pursue it? I was like, no, that doesn't interest me. But I knew he always had sustainability in mind. And when he proposed this, I thought like, there's no way this works. So then I started reading, a bunch of academic papers for like 6 weeks, like due diligently. And the thing I just kept on running into is like, why hasn't anyone tried? Clearly it happens in nature. Clearly we're doing it badly in the troposphere with sulfate emissions at ground level. Why isn't anyone trying to do this in the stratosphere? At least small amounts, to then validate, okay, like this is safe, this is scalable, which it is. That's kind of where we're at right now, trying to figure out how to scale up to a meaningful amount.
Awesome. So at this point, the audience is really mad at me because they're like, wait, I still don't quite know what Andrew and Steve are talking about. And I've been sitting here for 10 minutes. So why don't you give your elevator introduction to what the company does?
Sure. So Make Sunsets launches reflective clouds near the ozone layer to cool Earth. What we do is mimic what volcanoes, specifically stratovolcanoes, have been doing for millions of years. The ones that we particularly are interested, because there are volcanoes that can cool Earth too much, but the ones that we're specifically interested are Pinatubo back in 1991 that injected roughly 20 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere and cooled the planet by 0.5 degrees Celsius. There was even a more recent instance in 2022 called Hunga Tunga that injected roughly 400,000 to 700,000 tons of sulfur dioxide into the southern hemisphere and cooled the southern hemisphere by 0.1 degrees Celsius for about a year. And so we're essentially just trying to mimic that natural process where we're putting a reflective material that has been shown in nature to do it and apply this essentially sunscreen until we can decarbonize our energy stack. Like you had previous guests like Casey Handmere. He and I are good friends. Companies like that to scale up. Casey is getting there, but there's a time where it's going to be a little bit of an overrun, and we need to be able to mitigate the worst effects of climate change until companies like Casey's companies can scale up. Not only the heating is happening now, as scientists have pointed out, we're currently at 0.1 to 0.4 degrees Celsius of warming since the pre-industrial levels. And like there was a New York Times article saying that the rate of warming has been accelerating. For every decade, the world currently warms up by 0.25 degrees Celsius. And so that's bad. I mean, there's no like magic number where that like, rate of, or, 0.5 versus 0.6, like those are like going higher is not good, but there's no like magic number where we have to like say, okay, like this is the line that we're crossing, or we're trying to draw a line on. What we're trying to say is that if we know how to warm up the planet using carbon dioxide, aka greenhouse gases, we should also figure out a way to cool it down.
Great explanation. So let me dig into some of the details here, because I'm sure my audience wants to hear it. So just to recap, we know from these examples, these volcanoes that you mentioned, that the sulfur dioxide, if it's ejected into the atmosphere, it increases the reflectivity of the Earth. And so that the Earth reflects more of the sunlight into space, and therefore it cools the Earth. We have some guess at how much, what the effect size is per, say, a million tons of sulfur dioxide that reaches the atmosphere. Presumably we know how persistent, how long that effect lasts. I guess it was a temporary effect after each of these volcanoes.
Correct.
Maybe just say
it's called residence time. Exactly. And so this is why VCs love us. It's recurring revenue. You got to reapply that sunscreen year after year.
Right. So a typical molecule, let's say you get it all the way to the stratosphere, how long is that going to persist, or at least continue to increase the reflectivity of the stratosphere? How long does that last?
So it depends on the latitude as well as the altitude and also the particle size. But based off the modeling, based off the real world examples, anywhere from 1 to 3 years.
1 to 3 years.
Versus, yeah. So this is, again, if you inject it near the ozone layer, so 20 kilometers and above. But if you actually inject sulfur dioxide in the troposphere, so this is the air that we breathe, this is where commercial airliners fly, this is where most weather activity happens, you still get some reflectivity, you still get some cooling, but that residence time then gets cut down to 10 days or a couple of weeks because of the rain clouds, because of there's no stratospheric winds circulating and dispersing these aerosols all around the world.
Right. And can you steelman the critics, particularly the environmentalist critics of what you're trying to do? Are there people saying like this amount of SO2 in the stratosphere is going to have these negative consequences for the environment, and therefore we shouldn't do it?
Yeah. And that's like the big argument that we get all the time. Luckily, climate scientists and atmosphere scientists have modeled all these types of scenarios. Like we will personally never try and, like, at least as far as I know, I'll never try and cool the planet by more than 0.5 degrees Celsius. If we even are so lucky to get that far. But that's, in my opinion, the do not pass go line, because that's what Pinatubo did. And in 1991, I was 6 years old. Like, I don't remember anything bad happening in 1991 weather-wise, but, everyone's mileage may vary. But in my opinion, it was a fairly nice time in my life in terms of weather.
That was a beautiful summer in 1991. That was the year I finished my PhD at Berkeley, drove across the country to Cambridge, Massachusetts, and the weather was fantastic.
Yeah, there you go. And it was 0.5 degrees cooler during that time. And so that's like, we're not saying we want to create an ice age. And like, that's a lot of what the academic papers try to model out, because they want to know what is that upper bound of like doom. But we know that this is something that can be injected in various amounts, in small quantities that can scale up easily. And then again, it falls out in about a year or two. And so, we can actually modulate how much cooling we really want. And that's the most exciting thing, is reversible, just like volcanoes, just like what's currently happening, where back in 1979, we were injecting roughly 140 million tons of sulfur dioxide into the troposphere. And then the Clean Air Act kicked in, the EPA clamped down on sulfur emissions, and now we're down to roughly around 72 million tons of sulfur dioxide worldwide. And so because of that, there's been a lot of papers and articles recently saying that we've unmasked this cooling because we're quote unquote cleaning up the air now. And so we're still injecting CO2, which captures the heat, which traps the heat, but we're cleaning up the SO2 in the troposphere.
Right.
And so all we're proposing is saying, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Give us the number again of what you need in the stratosphere to get that 0.5 degrees Celsius cooling.
So this is based off the IPCC modeling, where essentially for every trillion tons of CO2 you put into the atmosphere, it warms up the planet by roughly 0.45 degrees Celsius. That's the average. Yep. And then based off of David Keith's work, he's one of the leading academics in this field, 1 gram of sulfur dioxide in the stratosphere offsets the warming effect of 1 metric ton of CO2 for a year. And so that's a 1 to million leverage. So you need roughly around 1.1 million tons of sulfur dioxide to be injected continually into the stratosphere to cool Earth by 0.5 degrees Celsius. So, which again is nothing. This is nothing.
Right. So I just wanted to make your point that a million tons in the stratosphere, and after a year or two, it ends up maybe back at sea level. That's negligible compared to the pollution that we already inject into the troposphere, right? It's
exactly.
It's a small correction.
And we're saying let's just shift some of it up a little higher. That's all. So it's not like we're adding anything to the system. We're just shifting it higher, where there's less of the downside effects of experiencing sulfur dioxide in the air that we breathe. Right. Because generally what happens is that when you inject sulfur dioxide into the stratosphere, there's this thing called the Brewer-Dobson circulation, where essentially if I don't know if this is a video podcast, but
go for it.
Just pretend my head is the globe. If you inject near the equator, what happens is that the aerosols essentially just travel to the poles, and it takes about that distance alone is why it takes about 1 to 3 years, and then it falls out at the poles itself. But since the amount is so little, that amount is negligible to anything down below, and so you can continually just reapply this sunscreen over and over again. Yeah, we've been applying this sunscreen. We've just been doing it the worst way possible. Instead of applying our entire body with sunscreen, we're just applying just on our faces, like with our eyes and our mouths open, which is not good.
Now, I think this is the part when we were having dinner together, I was kind of stuck on for a while. I was like, what is actually happening with the physics? So, you take the contents of our atmosphere and you just increase the concentration of SO2 just slightly, but there's a significant increase in reflectivity, I guess, in wave. It must be visible light wavelengths. I don't know, maybe you can say a little bit about that.
Sure. So what we're actually influencing is watts per square meter. So it's called radiated forcing is the unit of measure, or is the metric that we're actually trying to influence. And so currently the Earth is absorbing way too much sun versus reflecting it away. And so by increasing albedo, meaning how reflective something is, that's how we can actually prevent the sunlight from even hitting the greenhouse gas layer, which is what is trapping the heat. So we're kind of up the chain in terms of like the greenhouse gases, where we can technically continue to increase CO2 levels to higher amounts without the warming effect if we can apply the right amount of SO2.
Right. I think the part that I was kind of hung up on, as a physics guy, as you were explaining this to me, is how could such a small increase in concentration of sulfur dioxide actually have this, pretty significant, effect of changing the albedo of this Earth's atmospheric layer, and it still probably needs a little bit more, at least for me to understand it at the microphysical level. But I guess it must be that SO2 is just extremely absorbent and emissive.
Reflective. Yeah. I mean, just think of very, very tiny mirrors. I mean, it doesn't have to be SO2. Other candidates have been calcium carbonate. Yeah. And also another one is diamond dust. But for various reasons, scientists keep going back to SO2 as the kind of ideal candidate for now. But we're not married to SO2 as a particle in particular. It's just the most well-studied and naturally occurring. Is why we selected it as the aerosol to send up currently.
Got it. Okay. So I think we've explained what you guys are trying to do. You're trying to get the stuff up in the atmosphere. Now, maybe talk about the mechanisms that you're currently using, because at the moment, people can actually pay you to inject some of this stuff into the stratosphere. But talk about the technology you've developed to do that.
Sure. It's very, very basic, and you'll be shocked how dead simple it is. We've had people come out and they go like, "Really, this is it?" And we're saying, "Yeah, this is how simple it is."
You're not firing
currently what we're No, no, not yet, not yet. It's just this. That's just too James Bond to termination shock. The reason why Neil Stephenson used artillery shells is because he's a gun guy, and so it fits his mo. But no one gets mad at balloons for the most part. For the most part, everyone likes balloons. We specifically use natural biodegradable latex balloons that the weather services use to get measurements of the weather. And so essentially all we do is we put sulfur dioxide in these balloons and then weigh it to understand how much mass we put in, and then put lift gas in. So it could either be hydrogen or helium, and then attach some telemetry to the balloon to verify the actual altitude, because that's the most important thing. And then based off the physics of the balloon itself, since it's natural latex, as you go higher and higher into the atmosphere, the balloon expands because the pressure outside the balloon gets less and less. And so the balloons are actually built to actually explode at a certain altitude, which we can calculate based off the payload, the weight of the payload, the lift gas, the size of the balloon, and then also what's the last one? Those are the main three. But essentially, then you can actually time where to actually make the balloon explode. And so we always aim for 20 kilometers and above.
This is literally a problem that one could assign in freshman physics, actually.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
The buoyancy, and the mass of the balloon, et cetera, and the tensile strength of the latex, et cetera. So Exactly. And so they're rated to go up to 30 kilometers. I think the highest we've ever gotten a balloon to go is about 35 to 40. So they get pretty high up there. The higher the better, but 20 is like everyone says this is the proper stratosphere, and then you'll get the 1 to 3 year residence time. Right.
And so these balloons are fairly small. Our payloads are currently around 1.5 kilos. So that offsets the warming effect of 1,500 tons for a year. So it's sizable. So that's roughly 68,000 trees in one of these 1.5 kilo payloads. So 68,000 trees, if you assume that each tree can offset, the tree life, for 1 year, a tree can offset roughly around 22 kilograms. So based off that math, because most people don't understand what 1,500 tons of CO2 looks like. So, if a tree everyone can just look outside and see a tree. So just manage 68,000 of those in this one single balloon that's about 6 feet in diameter, has that kind of leverage. And so to get to, say, the million-ton, payloads that we're looking for to actually offset, 0.5 degrees of Celsius cooling, there are balloons that NASA currently flies that have payload capacities of 1 metric ton. So 1 metric ton, for the people who want to see what that is about the size of a Toyota Yaris or a vintage Fiat 500. That's what about a ton weighs. So there are balloons that actually can go up, that have that kind of payload capacity that we can leverage to use to send up the sulfate aerosols. But you can also use artillery shells. You could also use supersonic jets, because it doesn't have to be supersonic, but generally you want something that's supersonic, because then you get when you have a supersonic plane, you have to go higher because of the wind resistance. If you fly too low with supersonic, you're running into too many air molecules, so you get less efficiency. But it could be a U-2 spy plane as well. But then the trade-off is the payload is very small.
Now, for you guys, if you were someday or humanity was someday doing this at scale, so 1 million tons a year, are balloons probably the most feasible way? And at that point, what is all this? I know you keep saying biodegradable, natural latex, but
yeah,
but 1 million such balloons going up every year, are there environmental issues associated with that?
Absolutely, and we should we should solve those problems as we run into them. And so there are plastics that are biodegradable. Another thing that actually one of your guests, again, I'm going to reference Casey Hanmeyer because he's the one who kind of led us to this. But we could just burn the balloons up there. Once they reach the altitude, since we use hydrogen as a lift gas, we can actually have a time charge, or even just have some telemetry saying like, okay, we know the rate of climb for this balloon, and we know it takes roughly around 120 to 150 minutes based off a balloon going about 3 to 5 meters per second to get to the stratosphere. Then that's when we ignite this payload and then release the hydrogen, or burn the hydrogen, which then burns the balloon, but then also releases the SO2. And so to do this at scale, we're not going to be doing this launching individually. As you referenced, our backgrounds are in hardware. Like we want to nerd out. We want to build the robots that can launch balloons, at automation, but we're just not there yet. And so, but to visualize how that balloon launching robot would look like, imagine a balloon, your Amazon packages that you get, you'll get these little air cushions inside of them. Imagine that machine that does it is just essentially a balloon sausage. And instead of injecting air into it, you inject hydrogen plus sulfur dioxide. And so now you have this balloon sausage that's just going straight up into the air. And these balloons are about the diameter about 10 meters and about the length of a kilometer. So these are really, really big balloons. But, we're not breaking any physics here because, NASA regularly flies like payloads that are around 3 to 4 tons of payload. So like 3.5x larger than what we're currently proposing.
Yeah, I love the ambition. Ideally, is it near the equator or does it matter?
Correct. And so you want to do it closer to the tropics. So then you get that longer residence time. There are proposals to actually launch closer to the Arctic to then target just the ice caps.
Yeah.
However, then that residence time gets cut down to roughly about six months.
Got it. Okay. But somewhere in some fairly isolated area, there's this giant factory that's just like streaming up these tubes of plastic into the sky. And
exactly.
every now and then one of these sausage tubes ignites. And
yeah.
Excellent. In terms of the near-term dynamics of your company, I assume you're doing R&D to figure out what that scalable, sort of massively scalable solution would look like. But are you also trying to become profitable based on carbon credit type financing? Like, just explain,
that's correct.
What do you guys
That's
do?
Correct. Yeah. So, when we looked into this space, we quickly saw that the CapEx to get into any kind of carbon removal or climate tech intervention type of company, the CapEx was enormous. And
Casey knows.
As Casey knows, yeah. Us being the kind of scrappy startup guys we are, the first thing we thought is like, how can we make this a profitable business from day one? And how can we financially sustain ourselves until that day comes where, yes, we have the plans of how to scale to a 1-ton balloon, but how can we work our way up there? And it's just bigger and bigger balloons. And so currently what we're doing is we're selling what we call cooling credits, where one cooling credit costs anywhere from $1 to $5 to offset the warming effect of 1 ton of CO2 for a year. And so this one cooling credit we'll group together every month, put the equivalent into the S2 into the balloon, and then send a report saying, hey, we sent your balloon on this day. It reached this altitude. These are your serial numbers of the, say, 1,500 grams that we deployed in this one certain balloon. Thank you so much for helping us cool Earth. So it's essentially the kind of business model that we've had. Hopefully what happens is that then we have critical mass of people where then corporation will start to adopt this as part of their sustainability goals. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. But again, if you want to currently remove like a ton of CO2 using direct air capture, it costs anywhere from $400 to $500 per ton. This is not an apples to apples comparison. Again, ours only lasts for a year. Direct air capture can be, hopefully sequestered for over 100 plus years. But, the cost curve is so dramatic in terms of like, we're currently charging $1. We can get it down to 1 cent, sub 1 cent. Direct air capture is hoping that they get it down to $100 per ton removed in 10, 20 years. We can do that with just a big enough check if someone is willing to launch a really, really big balloon with us.
So yeah, it's an important distinction that if you capture the carbon or you stop someone from emitting the carbon, that carbon was going to be circulating the atmosphere for a really long time, whereas your effect is transient, maybe 1 year effect.
We're essentially decoupling the warming from the CO2.
Right. I mean, given this disparity in the timescales, is there any hope that like the EU might make what you're doing eligible for equivalent of carbon credits and things like that? Or is it just have to be right now the goodwill of someone who just feels good because they spent $1 on cooling things a little bit?
I mean, if we can just look into my crystal ball right now, that's the hope. People realize that we're not going to build power fast enough. we're gonna even, and no one wants to install AC units in the EU right now, for some reason or another. But like, then people will start to realize, okay, is there something we can do on the macro scale to keep the energy like our energy grid stabilized until that day comes. And so it's something where, yeah, it's going to take time. I think people are just wrapping their heads around, instead of taking something away from the atmosphere and putting something in instead, in itself is a huge hurdle, unless you understand physics. And like, the reason why I wanted to jump on your podcast is because I think most of your listeners are physics guys or girls, and so like they'll quickly understand, like, radiative forcing and watts per square meter and all that stuff. But it takes a while for the normal person to understand, wait a minute, you're not taking anything away from that unless you're actually adding something, and you're not actually solving the underlying problem. You're just kind of kicking the can down the road, which again is what we need right now. We need more time. There's catastrophic climate events happening all the time because we're introducing more energy into the system than taking it away. So that's what we are.
I think one of the numbers we should have mentioned by now, is my fault that we didn't get there already, is, the total cost to, cool, say to cool the planet for 1 year, half a degree Celsius. It's rather modest. Is it like $50 billion or something?
It's less than that. It's like $1 to $2 billion.
Oh, it's $1 to $2 billion. So yes, yeah. That was another thing that struck me when I first spoke to you about this. This is like eminently affordable. Like, government programs easily spend that much on CO2 related stuff, right? So
absolutely.
So if you had the tech ready, and you just said to the EU or some crybabies who actually care about this stuff, just kidding. Just give us $1 or $2 billion, and we'll counteract the huge amount of the CO2 related heating. The amount of money is just shockingly small that's involved here.
Right. And to give you some context, I mean, $1-2 billion sounds like a lot of money, but there was a Bloomberg article saying that since May of 2025, if you walk back 12 months, the US alone has experienced about $1 trillion worth of climate damages. And so it's like, again, like, just do the math. Like, I think that's a good bet. Like, $1 trillion versus $1 billion.
Yeah. If you took all the developed countries together and you convince them that, okay, $100 billion a year in climate related damage is happening to you guys, and for 1% of that, you could kind of alleviate it for coming years. It seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah, it is. And I think the things that we're currently facing up against, and the critique that we get, is that the scientists who are researching this, they want to do more modeling. They want to make sure that every stone is unturned. They want to make sure they're at 0.999999, like 9 nines of degrees of confidence before like even a single molecule gets deployed. And so we face criticism because of that, because we have a more cowboy approach of saying, listen, we know this works. Mother Nature already did it to us. We just got to scale this up very slowly and win hearts and minds doing it, because at the end of the day, no one actually does listen to scientists, in my opinion. If we did, we'd have solved climate change back in the 1980s when Carl Sagan, stepped in front of Congress and said, hey, this greenhouse gas thing is we should look into this. Yeah. But it's something where I think there's modeling can go only so far. You have to actually show it and prove it. And that's where the hang up is that people don't want to experiment on themselves, or, there's all this kind of consent. But once people realize the risk involved in the little amount that we have to put up in the cost, I think that's when people start to kind of warm up to stratospheric aerosol injection. Yeah.
Now, of course, I have not looked carefully into all this research, so I'm just accepting what you say, and it doesn't sound completely crazy to me. But, if you say to these governments, okay, there's maybe $1 billion or $100 million of R&D required, and then we could start putting up not 1 million tons, but a fraction of that, and then look to see the effect, see if it's really distributing itself the way we think it should, see that there is a slightly measurable decline in the rate of heating or something. There's steps that one could take along this research program that I think don't jeopardize the world environment. Exactly. Right? They're small steps, definitely way smaller than like a volcano going off. And,
Right.
and surely we should explore that direction, which involves both the R&D of how you would make these sausages if you chose to do it, but then also like testing the impact of,
Right.
small.
The monitoring of it.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
I mean, I would think that satellites and stuff could measure the change in the albedo. Like if you had a slight change in the albedo, I would guess they have enough sensitivity that they at least notice it well before you have to put up enough to cause a 0.5 degrees Celsius cooling.
Correct. Yeah. So that's why we say that right now our kind of intermediate goal right now is to scale up to that 1 ton payload, because based off the conversations we've had with scientists, roughly around 10 to 100 tons of sulfur dioxide can be measurable by satellite. And
Wow,
so
10 to 100 tons.
Yeah. And so, you have to have good timing. You have to follow the plume, like all this kind of stuff. But the satellite that we would leverage is called TRPOMI, which is a European Space Agency satellite that was specifically to monitor, weather activity plus volcanic eruptions. And so that there is that level of sensitivity. There's even there's a current project called in the UK sponsored by Project ARIA, where they're trying to actually figure out what is that minimum amount of sulfur dioxide that you have to deploy to be detectable by current satellite infrastructure. And so they're going to go the modeling route. We're going to go the actual physical route and show that it actually works. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
There's an alternate universe not too far from ours where I became director of ARIA.
Really interesting. You're looking for a CEO right now, so.
Because my ARIA was a creation of my buddy Dominic Cummings when he was in power in the UK.
Got it.
With Boris Johnson, and I was one of the people mooted for the directorship. And
no way.
Yeah, it's funny. And
that's cool. Small world.
So in that alternate universe, I approved the R&D project involving your company, Make Sunsets, and then this thing is chugging along. But
yeah. I mean, they've raised, I think, was it 45 million pounds or something like that. So, I mean, it's a good first step. Again, there's no deployments involved. It's all modeling. But at least there's some real money going behind it, and there's actual government support, which is exciting. But in my opinion, like I kind of look at, and we can step into kind of more in your field, but I was an early employee of Scale AI back in 2018. Like before that time, it was shit data in, shit data out. Yeah. Until you actually had well-labeled data, that's when machine learning models actually got useful. And so I feel like that's the same thing that's happening currently with stratospheric aerosol injection and their modeling troubles, is that they're using very stale data or data that's just not clean. It's obviously done via volcano, but you're also then have to, sieve out all the CO2 and all the other counteracting aerosols as well as the greenhouse gases. So, when Pinatubo injected 20 million tons, yes, it cooled the Earth by 0.5 degrees Celsius, but there was also a tons of CO2, millions of tons of CO2 that actually went up as well. So it wasn't a clean, a clean reading is what I'm trying to say.
I mean, in general, I'm very skeptical of climate modeling. I think you mentioned a couple previous guests I've had on the show. So I've had Casey Hanmer, who's on the carbon capture side, Klaus Lachner, who's a kind of crazy. Well, actually, they're both physicists, but Klaus is kind of a crazy genius. I guess he's the guy who first proposed carbon capture as a possible thing, and he started out as a particle physicist at Los Alamos. But then I had a third guy who also I was trained in general relativity, but then became like one of the leading climate and weather modelers. Now his name escapes me, but I'll put the link in the show notes. But that whole episode is about the limits of relations.
Modeling. Lack of data.
Yeah, and I think the best data would be if you could really track a plume using a satellite and measure how it affects the reflectivity. I think that would be amazing if you could actually do that.
Yeah, and that would take probably about $20 million. So if there's any billionaires listening to your podcast right now.
Well, there are some. No guarantees. But so I think that would be an amazing experiment. So in the event that we really do need to take aggressive measures to directly counteract global warming, it's good for humanity to do that basic science to figure out what's the most feasible method. And yours might be the most feasible method.
And if it's not, we're willing to shut down the company. This is why we call it Make Sunsets. We want to sunset this product as soon as possible, because we want companies like Casey Hanmer's Terraformation to scale up to meaningful amounts, because that's what we need. We can't keep applying this sunscreen, but we've actually been doing it. We've just been doing it in the wrong altitude and too much of it.
My view on climate change, well, one, as I've stated in some of the other podcasts, I have a lot of, I think there's a lot more uncertainty in the modeling than the actual IPCC type people would admit to.
Yeah.
But the other thing that people, I think, are not aware of, you need sort of overlapping areas of expertise to understand this. The rate at which China is shifting to renewable energy production, they're going to pass 50% of electricity generation from mostly wind and solar this year, I think. Tells me that, again, if you do these like sort of back of the envelope, large scale calculations, tells me in a few decades, because that energy is the cheapest energy you can make. It's cheaper than burning stuff. Within a few decades, I think we will not be pumping substantial amounts of additional carbon into the atmosphere, because eventually these new technologies, which are clean, will actually take over just based on purely on economics without any additional subsidization, just because the technology is getting better. So really the next few decades that we have to really worry about. And I can imagine a scenario where, okay, first of all, it could be there's not really a big problem over these next few decades, because models are very uncertain. But even if there is a huge problem, or we just decide we want to spend money to not have these climate catastrophes and stuff, I could imagine a world where they go to your solution and they just use it for 10 or 20 or 30 years until the rate of CO2 emission goes way down because of these renewable energies. And Casey's stuff never gets off the ground. It's totally, we don't really need to remove it. It's there, and we had some warming, but we just live with that. And then the amount of CO2 production by humanity as a whole just goes way down because of these new technologies. I mean, I could easily imagine it happening that way. I think the thing that when I talk to most people, even people who care about climate, know a little bit about climate, they don't necessarily know the economics of what's happening with electrification in China.
It's tremendous.
Look at what's actually happening in China, where the car fleet, transportation fleet, and renewable energy production it's clearly past the tipping point. You know where it's going to go. It may take them another year or two, but it's definitely going to get there. And then the rest of the world will figure out, oh, this is actually a better way to do it. So for me, it's a finite time problem. The CO2 thing is eventually actually going to be solved just by pure scaling of energy technologies.
I agree. And to be fair, Casey will remove CO2, but then use it to convert it into hydrocarbons to then burn it and reintroduce it.
No, that's true. That's true. So his thing gets fully working. He's actually making useful stuff out of the CO2 he removes. So
instead of putting it into the ground, which I think is not the way to go right now.
Well,
maybe it's an incremental step, like, because that's the first part of Casey's equation. So
right. But it is amazing. Like, if I were if I were a philanthropist and I were advising you, I might say, like, hire a really good lobbying firm in Europe, because they're wasting far greater amounts of money on stuff that's potentially less impactful than a mature version of your technology. Right. So if you really could, like, counteract that much heating, spending only $1 billion a year or $2 billion a year, it's like, wow, that's the best solution anybody's ever thought of.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't me. This has been studied since the 1970s. There's been over 2,000 academic papers written about this.
Right.
There's been scientists who dedicate their lives to try and discount this as a climate intervention, and then got converted and became proponents of it, which is kind of crazy.
Is there any entity, like maybe an academic lab or something, that is spending as much energy or making as much progress in this direction as your company?
No, sadly. I mean, well, I'm maybe being unfair here. There was ScopeX, which was led by David Keith, and it was a Harvard-backed effort to send instrumentation to analyze aerosol plumes.
Yep.
They raised $20 million from Bill Gates, but unfortunately they got shut down. They couldn't even launch a single balloon, and it was because of the pushback that they got. There was a native group in I believe Norway or Sweden who said, you can't launch in our backyard. And so they got cold feet and say, okay, I guess we can't do this. And then kind of, close shop and went from there. So we saw that. We're like, what, sorry if I swear, but what the fuck?
Yeah.
Just do it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Like we're doing this in we're doing this in Northern California. Like right now,
Well,
we've launched 100.
that's where the Silicon Valley attitude comes in. It's like,
Yeah, exactly. We don't have the baggage of trying to get published here. We're just trying to solve a problem.
Incredible. So, what should we look for in terms of big milestones for you in the next year or two? Is it getting that 1-ton balloon up there?
Yeah, exactly. And it's really like either we'll get it through, like we have roughly now 900 plus customers. These customers include like Palmer Luckey, Emmett Shear, who was the one-day CEO of OpenAI at one point and co-founder of Twitch. We've got who else? Yishin Wang, who is the ex-CEO of Reddit, but now is a tree guy. Like those types of guys are kind of like helping us out. And, we just need more of them. We just need to get more smart people to understand the physics of this and the economics and how scalable it is and to be talking about it. And from there, I think it's just a matter of, shots on goal like this, where I get opportunities to talk to people like you and to a broader audience who understands like, this is something we should do and try. And if it doesn't work, it goes away in a year. And it doesn't cost much. So that's where we're at right now. And we've been essentially like in, cockroach mode trying to do that. Like I pay myself $60,000 a year right now. And you see my kids there, they're cute, but they cost a lot of money. And so in the Bay Area, and so, we're sorry.
They can eat.
They can eat. Yeah. I think they gobbled like 10 s'mores. Like we were talking. And so,
you need to get on the feel good, do gooder, TED, effective altruism, et cetera, circuit, which I'm sure you're aware of, but, one step at a time, I guess.
Exactly. I think it's just like, we're still obviously trying to figure out our messaging. There's a lot of blocking and tackling from like the conspiracy theorists. Like, I don't know if you were following the news over the weekend about, the whole Texas flood stuff. But like MGT.
That was your fault.
No. I mean, they're throwing shade on my friend Augustus Dorico because he actually has operations of cloud seeding down there. But based off the evidence that he showed, clearly they were not responsible. I mean, this is just climate change. This is what's happening. It's what's going to happen more frequently. So yeah, it's just something where we get bunched in with natural weather events that are affecting people. They think it's us. And like, to be clear, we've only deployed roughly around 160 kilograms of sulfur dioxide. So this is a drop in the bucket.
Yeah.
Like
just proof of principle.
Exactly.
Hey, since we've gone through whatever listeners are still left after we're at an hour now. Whenever listeners are still left, this is a good chance for me to explain. I think that with the background that we've covered now, the easiest way to explain why I believe there is so much uncertainty in climate modeling, which is largely unacknowledged by most modelers, although the guest whose name escapes me, who's one of the most famous guys in the whole field, acknowledged this in the interview that he gave with me, is the following: that when you model, the simulations are not good enough to figure out what it does to cloud cover. So dynamics of clouds is very like micro local stuff. It's not something we can easily simulate. There's tons of very nonlinear fluid dynamics and temperature flows. It's non-equilibrium thermodynamics. So we don't know whether as the planet heats due to CO2 trapping, the level of cloud cover gets to be greater or less. And when the distribution of the clouds as a function of altitude, we don't know. So it's all this
like serious cloud thinning. Yep.
Very complicated physics, which, if you really corner a modeler, like if a room full of physicists corners one of these climate modelers and start asking questions, they have to admit this is true. So there's lots of stuff not known about how the heating is going to affect cloud cover. Cloud cover affects reflectivity just the same way your SO2 stuff affects it. And so we don't know the sign. We literally don't know the sign of the feedback loop. So as the planet heats, does it become more reflective because of more high clouds in the atmosphere? Or does it become less reflective, in which case there's positive feedback? It's hotter and less reflective, so it absorbs more sunlight. Or is there a natural shutoff mechanism that happens because of the evolution of the cloud cover? And it's just unknown. So even the sign of that effect I would claim is not, maybe people claim to kind of know it, but I don't think it's known with confidence. And,
Yeah. So cloud, like I've talked to a lot of climate scientists and atmospheric scientists specifically, like clouds are such a, they'll readily admit like clouds are the most difficult thing to model.
If I gave you the biggest supercomputer in the world and I said, here's a cup of coffee and I'm going to pour cream in it now. Okay? And you just need to, I'll give you all the initial conditions of exact profile flow of the cream flowing into the coffee. You then deduce the pattern of, white stuff in the dark coffee, 10 seconds later. It's basically beyond what people can do. Okay. And the idea that I'm going to do this for the entire Earth with clouds, with CO2, with all kinds of like heating of the deep oceans and currents that evolve due to, there's so much stuff going on that for them to say they know what the cloud, like after the Earth is heated, say 1 degree Celsius from CO2 in the atmosphere, what has happened to the cloud cover? What has happened to the average reflectivity of the Earth? Nobody knows the answer to that. And so that's related to whether there could be a nonlinear takeoff where, we get in this terrible situation where the Earth just becomes Venus, or it actually just damps itself out. And it's like, who cares? We have higher sea level, but we didn't get that much warmer. Our initial projections were just wrong. And there are people who look at historic eras where the CO2 levels in the atmosphere were much higher than they are now, but the Earth wasn't unlivable, and just say, these guys, don't know what they're talking about. So I think at a purely technical level, a true criticism of this field, not through any fault of their own, because it's just hard. It's hard science, which requires like simulation of a very nonlinear system. But I just thought I would throw that out there because I think that's an essential, if you're a scientist and you're interested in understanding climate and its effect on human civilization, that's a key point. And we've sort of set it up through the discussion that you and I have been having for the last hour.
Totally. But to be clear, directionality of SO2 in the stratosphere always cools the planet down.
Yeah,
that's
I
sure.
totally get it. I should have done the homework before I got on this call, but the notion that you start to increase the level of
radiative forcing.
Yeah, SO2 dense. Well, just suppose I just take normal atmosphere and I just start sprinkling in small concentration of SO2, and then I just ask, what is the reflectivity of that gas? That is presumably knowable both through laboratory experiments and probably through theory, just direct calculation, probably figure it out. And I would guess there's low uncertainty in that effect. I would guess people are very confident that the sign of what you're doing is known, which is different from the sign of
everything else.
Effect of clouds contingent on some further heating of the atmosphere of the Earth, right? I think we don't quite know the answer to it. So great. Well, Andrew, it's been great having you on the show. What is the best way for people to contact you? We'll put your website of your company in the show notes, but if some billionaire urgently wants to talk to you about some testing in the atmosphere or something, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Andrew at makesunsets.com, or you can find me on Twitter. I'm just our company profile. I'm the one who monitors it and tweets out of it. So
just so billionaires
make sunsets.
DM you.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's happened before, which is kind of crazy. So like Twitter's a great channel for that. Like you don't find that on LinkedIn. Everyone's getting hounded on LinkedIn for trying to ask the billionaire for a job rather than crazy geoengineering experiments.
I've known Neil Stevenson for a long time. He actually he attended he grew up in Ames, the earlier part of his life in Ames, Iowa, where I grew up. So he actually attended the high school that I attended.
Cool.
He would be a great spokesperson for you because he's pretty technical. So if you walked him through all the details and he became convinced directionally you guys know what you're doing, then he would be a great spokesperson to spread the word that this is actually a viable thing that needs more work.
That'd be amazing. If you can set up an intro, I'd love that.
You guys. I don't even think you need me, because if he blogged about it, you should just. I'll give you his email address. You can just ping him and just say, hey, we're the guys. Can you help us spread the word that this makes sense? Or we'll educate you about it. And then if you believe us, then maybe you can help us, right? So
totally.
Cool. Andrew, thanks a lot for being on the show. Wish you guys all the best.
Thank you so much, Steve. Have a great one.